another one assigned. There are all the things that is possible to do, but this is a generally way that what do you mean? But what do you mean? Sure,
Yeah, take care.
Sure, but it's very sure, but this is definitely your friends or the resources that are allocated here. What the right is here, there is what is the possible, what are the options that you can do? At the end of the day, this person, I want to wait. And say, I want it to next A. He doesn't know the detail of the these nodes. Yeah. From A to B, this concept of communication from A to B, I have to go and
Hello, everyone. Let's start. This is PCE Working Group. Thanks for coming. We know we have a clash with RTGWG. Thanks for showing up for this meeting. And this is our note well. This is Friday, so I'm sure you have seen this enough. But if you are new to the meeting, when you register for IETF, either as a remote participant or as an on-site attendee, you agree to this note well. This note well provides you link to various IETF policies that you should adhere to. The most important is the IPR policy. And this meeting is covered via this note well. So anything that you state during the mic, please take care of any IPR declaration around that. We also have various code of conducts and anti-harassment policies in the IETF that we work under. So please make sure that you are well aware of these policies. Let me... We have the blue sheets already out there. Please sign the blue sheets. Minutes, our secretary Hari will be taking the minutes. It's on Etherpad. So if anybody else wants to help out, the link for the Etherpad I have sent on the on our mailing list as well. So help out in the minute taking. This meeting is being recorded. There is an audio streaming as well as video streaming for the real-time Meet Echo, as well as the later this will be uploaded on video in a Meet Echo recording as well as on YouTube. So please mind the audio and video. All people, when they come to the mic, kindly state your name. This is important for minutes as well as for our future record. Presenters, there is a pink cross. Please mind that. Stand there so that the Meet Echo team can capture you while you speak. Since 1:05, Adrian has stepped down. Adrian helped us during the chair transition. So we want to take one more opportunity to thank Adrian for helping us out in progressing a lot of backlog that we had with the working group, as well as mentoring the chairs as we take on this role. Thank you, Adrian. This is a reminder that we want to reiterate that please use your mailing list. Please use the mailing list. The IETF work doesn't happen only at the meeting. It should happen on the mailing list first. All the decisions are taken on mailing list. When you ask for agenda slot, whether any discussion has happened on the mailing list is a one big criteria. So please use the mailing list. Whenever you have any private discussions and you are updating the document, please keep the working group in loop and tell them what the discussion was and why you have done the update. What does this update look like? The onus is on you to keep the working group in loop. So this is our request as chairs, that please use mailing list a little bit more. It's the most important tool that we have for our records as well as for consensus building. Also, a request that when our documents goes to working group adoption call as well as working group last call, we would request you to send more responses. We have a difficult time to interpret what does the silence in the list means. Does it mean no support? Does it mean don't care? You could just say that's a valid response. That's an input for us to chairs while we are looking at the consensus. It's also important that this put in a record, not just for the working group, but ISG as well as other directorate look at the mailing list to gauge how much the document is a output of the working group as a whole rather than a pet project of a few authors. So it's important that we get this information on the list. So please be more vocal on the list and review each other's ideas, and not just work on your own pet projects, but all our outputs of the working group is a combined output. Every working group adopted document is an output of the working group. So we have to collectively take responsibility for those documents. So please review documents from each other, and let's progress the work that we have been doing in the working group. Okay, how many of you are aware that we have a wiki? Okay, that's a pretty good number. And we have been doing this for last couple of IETFs. We have been maintaining our adoption queue, our progress of the documents, how we are balancing the work. If there is an action needed from either the authors or the chairs, that's been identified. So please continue to use the wiki. If you have an update, you can update it yourself. Or you can send a note to me or Hari or Julian, and we can keep it up to date with the latest status of your documents. If you have any suggestion on what else can be captured on a wiki, or if you have a preference of, for instance, some working groups prefer to send weekly status versus a wiki. So if you have any suggestion of how this information can be more useful for the working group, please give us feedback. A reminder that in this working group, we have an implementation policy. The implementation policy states that every working group ID should have an implementation status section, which should talk about whether an existing implementation exists, or are you planning to implement it, or there are no implementation as of now. Some information needs to be captured in this section. We will do the working group last call only when this section has is been added to your document. Most of the documents have done so. There are still a few. So if your documents is one of those, please add this section. And if you have a valid reason not to add this section, please get approval from the chairs. This is our agenda. We have a couple of documents on segment routing, on PCCC, some new ideas and some old ideas that have been discussed before. We did a little bit of shuffling since the last time we sent the agenda out. That was to manage a clash between the RTG, WG presentations as well. Any comments on the agenda? 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, now we are at the working group status section of the presentation. We have no new RFC since our last IETF meeting, but nothing to worry. There is a long queue of documents in the RFC editor queue. And thank you for the working group, for everyone who contributed to these documents. And we have made quite a bit of progress and cleared some of our backlog, especially in the IETF last queue things. So thanks to the working group, thanks to our AD, thanks to all our shepherds, directorates, everybody who helped out in this. So a quick run through segment routing, which is a part of cluster C340, which is all the MPLS segment routing document across Spring, MPLS, LSR, etc. Right now, this is auth 48 done. That means that the final version from RFC editor is out and authors had a look and they have confirmed that this version is ready to go. And the whole cluster will be published together. That's where this document is waiting. We have a misref on WSON, which is waiting for GMPLS, which status I will cover in the next slide. One document which is currently in auth 48, which is a hierarchy extension. Most of the work here is done. There are only a few comments that we need to talk to the RFC editor and resolve this. And then this document will be ready to be published as well. Couple of documents which RFC editor is editing, which is association group and inter-area AS applicability, and some documents which are in the queue to be processed. There are two documents which are still with the ISG. The GMPLS had discussed for a long time, but Cyril had made an update and discussed with the AD, and the discuss is cleared. We still have last two pending comments that needs to be answered. And once those are done, finally, we would get this document out to the RFC editor as well. The diversity document was under ISG telechat just before this IETF. It has a discuss and it's pending authors to respond. So authors have told me that they will try to respond this just after this IETF. We had some early code point allocation request, but those documents have now reached RFC editor queue, so we don't have to worry about them anymore. And right after this, we will have no other early code point pending in our INA registry. We got one errata during this period. Errata is 5796 on RFC 8231. This was regarding the error handling clarification. The chairs suggested that we should put this errata on a hold for an actual document update for now. And we will discuss with the AD to progress this after this IETF meeting. We have an incoming liaison. This you would have seen in other working groups as well. This liaison came from ITUT and came to CCAMP, MPLS, PALS, PCE, and Ts. Scott Manfield is the responsible liaison manager here, and the chairs are collecting the list of documents that we need to add in our reply for this this message. If anybody has any comments on this, please reach out to the chairs. So this covers the working group status. The last section of the chair slide is about the status of all the working group IDs and the next steps. So we have two documents which are in the post working group last call state. The first is the PC stateful flags, which was earlier a draft Farrell PC stateful flags. When we did the last call and sent to the ISG, we got the request back to the working group to change the name, which was done, and a request to get any other feedback from the working group was also given. So the last date is actually today. So if you have not seen this, or if you have support for publication this as our request for being more vocal on the list, this would be a good example to just do this right away. It's a very simple, small document that you can go through. It clarifies something that was missed in RFC 8231, so it fixes a mistake that the working group made. So before we ship it to the AD as a second try, today is the last day for you to respond as a working group. We have another document, the PSEP flow spec, whose working group last call was extended because we had a late IPR. And this is something, again, a reminder for everyone to make sure that the IPR declaration is done at the right time. It's your responsibility as a working group to make sure that you do this timely. And also, we have the Shepherd review for this document ready. And soon we will be able to publish, send this to AD as well. Some documents that we believe are nearing working group last call. We have the LSP scheduling, 2 association drafts, policy, and bidirectional. So this is just a heads up to the working group that these are the documents that we will be doing last call. So if you have not read this, or if you this is the time to familiarize yourself before we do the last call. We have one document which is stateful GMPLS. This is now we merged the remote initiated GMPLS LSP into this document as well. After that, there was an editorial update done. There are still a few small reorganization in the document that would help with the readability. So once that's done, we can, I think the content is pretty stable. We can move to the working group last call as well. The last document there is a PCEP Yang. It imports bunch of TE documents. The good thing is the TE documents are now progressing quite well in the TE's working group and other places. But if there is one document which is the netconf TLS client server, and Tom Patch on the mailing list as well pointed this out, that this might take a little longer from the netconf working group to progress. It's in a big queue. They have a bunch of other documents related to the crypto that they want to focus on first before they come to the TLS client server. So it's a question for the working group that should we wait? Should we send ours and put a note to the RFC editor that the tree and some parts of the document would need to be updated once the TLS client server reaches the RFC editor queue. So this is something that we need to think. The chairs and the AD will discuss this and we'll come back to the working group with what's the right way to move forward. If anybody has any suggestion, this would be a perfect time to talk about it as well. Okay. We have some other documents. We have a native IP document which was presented at 104. There has been a change. A root priority got added in one of the explicit peer root TLV, and most of the other changes were editorial. So please review these changes. Another document was enhanced error. Again, discussed in 104. There has been an update. The main update was we agreed on a guideline that should be followed for any future document that adds error and notification, and what text they need to add to make sure that the enhanced errors are also supported. So that text is now in the 06 version, and most of the other changes were editorial. Some recent working groups document, we have a FlexGrid document and the SRv6 document. Mostly cleanup, a little bit of syncing of changes between the MPLS SR and SRv6, but the documents are progressing quite well. These are the documents that we adopted since the last meeting. We have the binding SID, VN association, and the path segment. The first two documents also have a 01 version posted with the comments during the working group adoption poll already handled. Please, if you have further suggestions for these documents, please use the list and provide your feedback. The final slide from the working group is our adoption poll queue. So this is our queue, as you would see in our wiki, of various documents that the chairs feel should be called for adoption. You can go to the wiki and also see another list, which is a list of documents that the authors feel they are ready to be adopted, and we are maintaining it a little bit separately. So you know your requests are heard and they are documented somewhere, and the chairs will have to make a decision on them soon once we have some of our pending documents out of the way.
Hi, this is Mike Kodishev from Cisco. We already implemented the PCE segment routing policy CP, the fourth item. So we would really like early code point allocation. And so for that reason, I request to expedite the adoption of that draft.
Thanks, Mike. Noted. I will discuss this with Julian and come back to you.
Thanks.
Is anybody has any other comment on their working group document or any adoption question? Otherwise, we'll start with our agenda. Okay, thank you. First up is Mike.
Hello, this is Mike Kodyshev from Cisco. I'm presenting on behalf of my co-authors. So this is PSEP extensions for multipath information. So originally in PSEP, you only had one ERO per LSP. And so there's been a number of recent applications where that's not sufficient anymore. And so I listed three that we are facing right now. So one is, as we know, for SR policy, each candidate path can have a list of segment lists. And basically, this is not possible currently to represent in PSEP, to have multiple segment lists. Second is, if you want to request a certain amount of bandwidth, but there is no one path that can satisfy that bandwidth, then today there's no way to return several paths that can split the bandwidth among themselves in some kind of multipath. And the third use case is we want to allow one path to protect another path, basically, to specify kind of protection. So we choose to include these ERO objects in the same PSEP LSP rather than creating multiple PSEP LSPs. And this was kind of discussed on the mailing list as well. And so this gives the nice property that a single report, update, initiate, and also stateless reply message carries all the information that you need. You don't need to aggregate multiple reply messages or multiple, update messages. And so it's very simple. We just introduce this ERO attributes object, and this object simply acts as a separator between ERO objects, and it also carries some attributes. So basically, wherever you have the ERO object, you can replace it with ERO attributes, followed by ERO, followed by ERO attributes, followed by ERO, and so on. And this object carries multiple TLVs, which can encode whatever attributes you want that ERO to have. Oh, sorry, just to go back. So we define like a weight TLV for carrying a weight of each ERO, which would allow for unequal cost multipath, which is required for segment routing policy. We also define this TLV for allowing protection between different paths. So it just allows more rich response from the PCE. And the capability for this is signaled in the open object using this TLV. And so it specifies here the number of multipaths that the requester is able to support. So if this TLV can go in two places, either in the open object or in the LSP object. So if it goes into the open object, that means that it's like a box-wide default value, versus if it goes in the LSP object, it allows you to override the global box value. So you can say that a particular LSP, I don't want any ECMP, for example. I only want one path. Even if you have more than one path, I just want one path. And that's it. It's very basic, very simple extension. So if there's any comments or questions, please ask. Thanks.
Are there any questions?
This is Yi Ling from Huawei. My question is actually today the PSEP protocol has support multiple paths within one message. For example, the PC update message, but the message is not carrying multiple ERO but carrying, for example, multiple update request object. Each update request object contains one LSP. That's today's method. So I want to know what's the gap for the today's message for your problems here.
Right. So it was discussed on the mailing list as well. There is a way to so basically one kind of update corresponds to one set of constraints right now. So what we want here is we want one set of constraints to contain multiple paths. So you cannot have kind of two updates because that would mean two different constraints.
This was something that was discussed in the last meeting as well, during the PCE operational, where we had multiple options, and the kind of agreement in the room at that time was that this is the preferred approach, that we want to have multiple EROs inside the path for SR policy. So we can go back to the what we discussed in the mailing list as well as the last meeting, and I can discuss with you as well during offline if you need to understand what we discussed in the last meeting.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Joanna from Huawei. I ask one question. The multipath is load balancing or not?
Oh, can you speak louder? It's hard to hear.
It's load balancing or not? About
Load balancing. So it is allowed for unequal cost multipath. So basically load balancing. You can send 40% traffic on one ERO and 60% on the other ERO, for example.
I have an interest on the load balancing scenario. I think I focus on this scenario. I have submit one draft named ICANN. It's a distribute mode. I think it's a centralized mode.
Okay.
They specify the multipath to the device, but the device how to do with the load balancing scenario. I think it's
okay. This is on the ICANN.
Yeah,
okay.
ICANN.
You can bring it up on the mailing list, and I can take a look.
okay. I will send the email to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew Stone, Nokia. Just to comment on your question about why can't we use multiple LSPs or multiple updates. This use case is also applicable to replication segment. So I would update, a single LSP that could have multiple egress paths because we're doing replication. And so if we were to try to use association to do that use case, it would just become a nightmare. And so you want to have, one incoming label, a binding label with multiple egress EROs. So there's a lot of use cases that this draft really covers. And so I think, expediting adoption of it is probably a good idea.
Thanks.
Stefan Mikowski from Cisco. This is just a question for my information. I haven't read the draft yet.
Sure.
Let's say that you have sent an update message initially, okay, with containing multiple paths, and then you have just one of these paths which is changing. Are you always advertising both?
Yeah, always advertising both.
Okay, and you have no way to advertise just what has changed? It's just a question.
For this scenario, no. So we do provide basically per ERO ID where each ERO can have an identifier. Oops.
Because I'm just wondering from an implementation point of view, you need to avoid an implementation having extra work, wondering if the path has changed or not.
Yeah, that's right. So we do provide a ERO ID there. So basically the implementation can match the ERO from the previous update to this update. But generally, when this update comes in, it's like you want, it's a single forwarding entry, usually. So there is some processing involved to compare these labels anyway. So
okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Mike, I also have a few thoughts.
Yeah.
Since you are adding this as a new object, the first thing would be that RBNF needs to be updated across all the message.
I see,
So
yes.
one question to the authors would be, did you guys evaluate maybe adding ERO attributes as a sub-object so that you can still put it inside the ERO list So it still acts as a delimiter amongst the path. I know it's not a very neat question, but I just want to know that did you analyze this or not? Can this be a sub-object inside the existing ERO so that you don't have to go and make a huge update everywhere else?
Yeah, we analyzed it. In fact, we very much discussed that option. We found that it kind of makes sense easier this way. You can, like, ERO represents, an explicit route, a particular path to, a set of labels or a set of hops. Now, when you add these, like, separator objects into that explicit path, then it becomes, I don't know, it becomes a more complicated object. And we thought that it's cleaner to do it this way. But if people can provide like a good argument otherwise, then.
Okay, quickly.
Pawan Biram, Juniper Networks. Yeah, I made that comment last time. We did, like Mike said, we did analyze that. It would have made sense if there was a strong use case for any transit action. So since everything, all the attributes that we were considering were ingress related, I mean, there was no strong case to be made for making it a ERO sub-object. Unless somebody brings it up, this is what we're going to go with.
Okay. But in the document, do update the RBNF.
Will do.
Yeah. Also, I want to add, like, if you make it a sub-object, then you can't have any TLVs added to it, right?
That's not a strong enough.
Okay. Well, but then it becomes kind of really, yeah. I guess you could have. Yeah.
Also, what happens to RRO? In this document, we have just focused on ERO. We also have an RRO. So
Yes.
we need to talk, like, I know it's a 0-0 document, but there are lots of open questions. So do try to handle that in the next update.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the RRO is probably is going to be along the same,
And I'll leave my comment about the backup when you guys actually have the text.
Okay, cool.
Right now, I'm not able to visualize how you are going to use the backup path IDs, etc. And how does it work with our existing mechanisms like protection association. So just think of these questions when you update the next time.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Drew.
Thank you. So next we have entropy, level position.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chen Xiong from ZT. My presentation today is the PSAP extension for SRMPL's entropy label position. As we all know, the entropy has been proposed in RFC 6790 to provide entropy for load balancing. And the draft IETF MPL Spring entropy label proposed to apply the entropy labels to SRMPL's networks. And it provides several criteria to determine the EL's placement. So the first one is we need to computer insert a limited number of EL pairs in the SRMPL's label stack. And second, the inserted positions should be within the ERLD over maximum number of transit LSRs. Finally, a maximum number of EL pairs should be inserted while satisfying the above criteria. So based on the criteria, we need to consider when the controller configure the path, when the controller is PCE, when PCE perform the path computation for SRMPL's networks, we need to configure the entropy label position with the path computation results together to configure the results to the networks. For example, as the figure show, the PC will compute the paths from A to E, and the label stack is as the figure show, and there are ECMPs existing in between A and B and between C and E. Then the PCE will compute the entropy label position, and for example, after B, and another one is after C. So after E, so the label stack with the EL, IEL labels is as the figure show. The is the B, EL, IEL, C, E, and EL, IEL. So this is the modification. This is the background of the draft. Sorry. So we extended the PSAP protocol. First, we extended the open object. We add a new type of flag to indicate that it supposed the SR pass with the ELP configuration. And we extend LSP object to indicate the PCE to compute the SR path with the ELP information together. And finally, we will extend the ERO object to carry the ELP information. And we will extend the E flag. When the E is set, it indicates that the position after the SR ERO subject is the position to insert the EL, ERI, EL. So another extension is that I noticed that the RFC 8231, the LSP object, the flag field is not enough for the an extension. The flag field is 12 bits, but 11 bits has been assigned. So this is it is not enough to for other extension. So this document proposed to define a new LSP extended flag TLV to extend the length over the flag field. So that's all. This is my presentation.
Any questions?
Stefan Likowski, what's the value of doing this compared to letting the ingress placing the EL? Because even if your PC is computing something, it does not really know what the ingress is really able to do. So possibly the ingress is not able to honor what the PC is requesting.
Because we think the PC has all the information, and
it has information from a purely theoretical point of view to what is the best position for the ELI ELs. Unfortunately, it doesn't know anything on what are the capability of the ingress to really able to insert multiple ELI ELs and where in the stack.
We think the
so it's for me it's not working.
The PC will collect the information like the ERLD, like the MSD into the
It's not because you have an MSD of 12 or 16 that you are able to push multiple ELI EL.
We just configure the position, the placement.
Again, it's not because you have an MSD which is X that you are able to push multiple ELI EL. It's really implementation dependent and you have nothing to signal it. So yes, PC can do a kind of optimization and give an advice to the ingress, but you have no insurance that the ingress will be able to honor it.
Okay.
And I don't see the value compared to just pushing a path and let the ingress doing its own job based on its own implementation.
I think there before the in EL pairs will be inserted at the ingress load. Then the placement the ingress don't know where the the placement to insert the position to insert the EL, but the PC has the information to configure it.
Stefan, would you be happy with if a PCC sends a message and say whether I was able to succeed in doing like how we usually do in PSEP, or you feel that this whole functionality doesn't make sense because most of the time PCE would never be able to give the right answer?
No, it could give the right answers. Think that you're missing here is what are the capability of the ingress of inserting multiple ELI ELs and where in the stack. MSD is not enough to know about that. MSD is just a generic information about how many labels I'm able to push, but I don't have any information on of what kind of label it could be.
Hi, Tarek with Juniper. So comment on Stefan's response. I agree that there should be a capability saying that I can push multiple ELs and ELIs, but in the multi-domain case, relying on the ingress might not, ingress might not be able to determine, where in other domains where the ELI will go and EL. So if the concern is capability, then we should extend capability.
True.
Yeah, we have extended the capability.
Not just the capability that you can do this computation, but what is the capability of the ingress when it comes to adding multiple ELI EL pair? So I'm not sure. I need to recheck whether you have that in your open message or via your IGP and BGP to communicate that as well. So I think keep this discussion going, and I think start a thread on the mailing list so that we can conclude on this.
Yeah, I think the capability and the extension of the BGP and the ACS has been approved in other working groups.
Yeah, that is usually ERLD and MSD. I think what Stefan is saying that that's not enough, and maybe you need something more. So please go and discuss and come back to the working group on what the conclusion was of the discussion.
Okay, thank you. About the updates of the RFC 8231.
Yeah. So I think this is an important thing that the working group should be aware of. We have sort of run out of any flags in our LSP object, so we definitely should fix this. Should we do this independently? Maybe that's the best option rather than clubbing it with this. So if you can just put this outside in a separate document, I think we can.
I fully agree. I think it would be better to manage this completely separately.
Okay.
I fully agree as well about the extended flags. Yeah.
Pawan Biram, Juniper Networks. I think there's a presentation later on about path protection. I mean, additional flags for protection. I guess there are a few new LSP attribute specific flags being defined. I don't know. There is RSC 6510 and that talks about LSP attributes for RSVPT. There's similar hop attribute extensions, which talk about mandatory and desirable kind of semantics for LSP attributes. Was there any discussion about replicating those semantics in PSEP earlier on? The LSP attributes semantics.
Let's discuss this after the presentation so that the working group is aware of what you're talking about.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So next we have Chang.
Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm Charlie from Hawaii. So my topic today is about the update of PCE-CC drafts. So regarding PCE-CC, it has been divided in IFC 82, 83, and 85 and architecture for use of PCE as a central controller, and it examines the motivation and applicability for PSEP as a control plan in SDN architecture, right? So mainly we will discuss 4 drafts as updates. So the first one is a basic or static RSP extension within the PCE-CC architecture. So as we all know that it has been adopted as a working group document right now, and this meeting, the main modifications are we update some like text for PCEP requirements, such as remove the normative things, and we sync up the changes from the PCEP SR document. Like we add support for link local IPv6 address via link local, like IPv6 address TLV, something like this. And we also add the implementation status and fix some INA section, something like this. And I think it's ready for like working group last call. So the second one is about the PCE-CC extension for SR. So the main changes are very simple. We sync up with the PCEP SR document, and we add some implementation status, and we fix the security considerations section. And next, it is the next item in the working group adoption queue. So we hope that it can be adopted very soon. Yep. Regarding the SRv6 extensions and P2MP extensions, mainly we have some editorial changes to keep alignment with the PCE-CC document. So nothing like major changes. So as the context, as the text like pretty stable, so we can see that if possible, we hope to add this kind of document to the working group adoption queue on Wiki. So that's all. Thank you. Any question or comments?
Any questions?
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, Tariq, you have a question? No. We have time to discuss.
Hi, Tariq with Juniper. There is another proposal to program point-to-multipoint replication segment. We did not present it this time, but I think the plan is to present it next time. So we can compare and contrast and talk about the proposals.
Great. Thank you.
Please use the list as much as you can when you have that discussion.
Sure.
Thank you.
So good morning, everybody. I'm here to present path protection enforcement in PCEP. Mike already made a very good point. It's actually local protection in PCEP. So I think we'll probably end up changing the name on that. So I have a use case here where I've got 3 LSPs, and for each of those LSPs, they have different kind of constraints on whether or not they want to have a protected path. And by protected path, we really mean about whether the SIDs or the adjacency SIDs have the B flag set, and that comes from LFA. So the topology here is really a crazy example. Hopefully you don't see this in a real network, but it may happen, where you've got certain links which have the B flag set. So LFA is available on those links. You have other links which do not have the B flag set. And amongst, for example, one of the links in the top left, it has both, right? A SID which is protected and a SID which is not. So I have LSP1, which says I must have a protected path. So in this topology, there's only one viable path. LSP2 says I must not have a protected path. It again also only has one viable path. Whereas for LSP3, it's low effort, it's low priority. I really just don't care. So in this situation, you end up with 3 potential possibilities. So the idea being is that to support these 3 possibilities, how do we tell PCE to calculate a path and take this into consideration?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
What is the requirement for must not have a protected path?
So you might have traffic or you might have LSPs where just because of their SLAs, you actually want them to go down, high bandwidth consuming paths, that you'd rather actually drop the traffic and fall back or revert to other protection mechanisms as opposed to allowing LFA to kick in. So we have 2 goals with this. First is to clarify some of the wording. So what we've seen through interop testing in the past, this was actually a few years ago, that different vendors have interpreted the local protection desired bit differently. So I did a little bit of digging to kind of see where this flag came from. And essentially it stems from RSVP, right? So in RSVP, the LSP attributes, you have a local protection desired bit. Now for this bit, in the case of PCE, this couldn't actually be used to influence the CSPF, the actual calculation. Of course, segment routing was added much later. Now, when vendors were implementing PCE and they wanted to influence whether or not an LSP should take an LFA protected path or not, they looked at this bit. Well, the term desired has a bit of vagueness to it, right? I would say that neither vendor implemented it right and neither vendor implemented it wrong, because you can really truly interpret it either way, in the sense of whether or not protection desired is a hard constraint or a soft constraint. So for SRT LSPs, like I just showed in the previous example, we actually want to influence the CSPF calculation. So first goal is to clarify some of the wording in the document. And the second goal is to add an additional way to signify that strictness, right? Whether or not I must have, or I must not have, or I don't care. So the proposal that we're doing is, well, first, some additional wording. It must be said that the wording that's being added to the document is trying to be as backwards compatible as possible, right? Because we do have implementations out there. So it is a little bit flexible in how we're treating the existing local protection desired bit. For that reason, and another reason, the actual proposal to achieve that strictness constraint, we're looking at adding another flag. So we're calling it the E flag. Now you could argue that, you know, asking for a protected or non-protected flag is a constraint of the CSPF calculation, not necessarily an attribute. The problem is including that data structure is relatively quite heavy. Plus then you end up having a split between what does the local protection desired bit mean if I also have a constraint. So I figured it'd be easier to tag along the local protected desired bit with this new E bit. So the combination of the E and the L bits, if you read the draft, basically allow you to have 4 individual states, right? 2 bits on and off. So the wording in there is, again, backwards compatibility and trying to achieve the first use case I presented. And so that's really the end of my presentation. At this moment, we're basically just looking for feedback, comments, especially from those vendors who have implemented it, to see how this achieves still backwards compatibility.
Hello, it's Michael Koldyshev from Cisco. Yeah, I think it's very useful, actually, this unprotected path to say basically like it must be unprotected versus it may, you know, we prefer unprotected versus it must be unprotected. Those are actual, you know, use cases for sure. So
thanks.
Pawan, you want to discuss your point? Or if it's the same question, can I ask a little bit more about this document before we go to a bigger discussion? Or up to you.
Yeah, I don't have any comment about the desire versus required.
Let me finish that. Sure. Okay. So I have a few questions. So maybe you can clarify. One, I was just reading RFC 5440. I know the name of the bit is desired, but the text says when set, the path computation must include links protected by FRR. I know the must is not in a normative way. It's in a small letters, but I think it's bit clear. So.
I found that text odd because that was written before segment routing existed. And so there was no way for PCE to actually influence, as part of its CSPF calculation, whether or not protection would actually be supported by the downstream RSVP router. Right. So at the time, as much as the language said, you know, it was a hard constraint, the point is it couldn't actually influence as part of the CSPF calculation.
I'm not sold on that. So let me.
So again, I agree. It definitely does say must. And again, when you stem back to the point that it references to the RSVP RFC, in that situation, it does imply that it's also a soft constraint. So that's why I mentioned, you know, there's no right or wrong implementation out there. It's just the wording can be interpreted differently. And to achieve, for example, these 3 potential options of must not have, don't care, trying to, you know, bridge those 2 worlds together between the 2 flags.
Okay. Also, I think I would like to have a don't care option. I think that we have lost now.
So you would like or would not like?
No, currently what we had was if I set a flag, either I mean I must or desired. And if I don't set a flag, we don't care. And right now, based on your adding of these two flags, if I unset both the flags, it would mean either
Right now, when both flags are set 0, it actually means I don't care. But you end up in a situation where you might have a link with multiple SIDs on it, some which have protection and some that don't. So for the backwards compatibility, it's falling back to saying, we'll prefer the one that does have protection. Because at the end of the day, you have to choose one. And so the use case actually has 3 states. But because of the bits, I basically said, well, let's have the 4 states. So you've got unprotected, I don't care, right, where everything is set 0. And then you have protected, or you have a protected preference, but I don't care. So
I feel it's a bit conflicting, because once you say that something is preferred, actually you do care, because you are using the word preferred there.
sure, the preference is more about trying to control the selection of which SID to use on a link which has multiple SIDs. So the word preferred, I agree, we can probably tune that wording. What it basically boils down to is one influences the CSPF calculation, the other one influences the SID selection along a link from that post-SPF calculation.
Any other comments? Pawan, floor to you. We have time, so yeah, no need to rush.
Yeah, the earlier comment was that now that we are trying to add more and more flags to LSP attributes, we do have precedence in RSVPT for attribute flags TLV, things like that. And there is an R flag which tells you whether it's required or desired. So the question was, do we bring those semantics into PSAP? PSAP always had the LSPA object. Correct. With the sub TLVs, but there is precedence in RSVP. Should we bring that in here? Has there been any discussion in the past? I'm sure there was some discussion, but I can't recollect.
Regarding optional and mandatory, we had it at the object level. So that, as you know, in RFC 5.4, that was there from the start. We missed it in the stateful. So there is another document that was discussed, I think, last IETF, where how we make sure that those flags are applicable at the object level. At a flag level, we don't have a mechanism. So if there is something that already exists, yes, a good reference to look at, and maybe a generic solution rather than per flag could be useful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing it up.
As from Nokia, I was just reading at the statement that you brought from RFC 54.
Can you closer?
The statement that you brought from RFC 5440, that it says that we path must include links protected with a fast reroute.
Yes.
But it doesn't say what happens if you cannot find a link that has fast reroute. And I think this draft cleared up. Because in that network, there's a case that your only path doesn't have the fast reroute. So my interpretation from desired means that we should take into account.
No, I understand what the requirement was. My only thing was that it's a bit of a strong statement to say RFC 440 was too ambiguous. I think it's, as an implementers, we might have interpreted it differently. So we need to fix that. I understand, but yeah, I agree. Let's go ahead.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Is Huaymo in the room? I think because we are running a little early, so I think let's move to the next presentation then, and we'll come back to it. Hari, just update that in the meeting. Just a reshuffling of the order.
Okay, good morning. This is Hao Mian, and I'm presenting this marathon project extension to PSAP to support resource sharing. And this has been presented last time, I think, in Singapore as well. And let's try to recap what has been included in the draft to give a reminder on the technical part. So basically, this work has a scope to support the explicit resource sharing strategy when you do the path computation. And especially this can be applied when a new LSP is used to replace an existing LSP, such as re-optimization or restoration. And the solution has been defined in this document would support the resource sharings between the two LSPs with different parameters like endpoints, bandwidth, and link share, node share, so on and so forth. So we have already coordinated with other documents in this working group, especially with the ones for association. So the association would be used as a generic object, and we have separate TLVs if you want to compute diversity, and if you want to compute in a sharing strategy. So what we have been proposed in this document is to reuse the association group object and indicate the new association type as sharing. So this is how the newly introduced TLV looks like. So we have set a few flags here to indicate what is the strategy and what is the objective for you to share during the path computation request. So we can have link share, node share, SRLG share for different kind of objective. And the proceeding rule for this kind of sharing would be, say, if we share a link, propose to share a link, the PCE will firstly try to share the link, and if it is possible to fail, so if the link share try is failed, then the PCE will try to find the path without link share. So this is different with a kind of mandatory constraint. And the same rule applies to the node share and the SRLG share as well. So what has been newly added in the recent update is a B flag. B flag would be used to do the bandwidth sharing, which is used for the bulk path computation. And this would be used to see we can have many LSPs using the same bandwidth, but it's a kind of planning instead of real deployment. So the changes has been made in maybe recent 1 year would be we updated some of the description in the use case section to harmonize with other kind of path computation strategies. And we also updated the error code to be consistent with the association error. And we add a description on the manageability considerations, and we also have other editorial comments according to the comments raised on the list. So this work has been pulled once with it seems it was good supported in the on-site meeting, but not on the mailing list. So according to the wiki and the requirement from the chairs, we are requested to have more reviews and more supporters. So we now get them, and we are now get better harmonized with other associated works. So we think this work currently is ready for the second round of working group adoption. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Hi, this is Mike from Cisco. You seem to only talk about PC request in the draft. So in the PC request, it's kind of clear because there's one, say, LSP that's there already, and then you're just requesting the other one. So you can't modify the one that's already there.
Yep.
But if it's like stateful, then you have two LSPs in this association group, and then it may be not very clear. If you change one, then you kind of forced to change the other because it's supposed to share. So.
Yeah, good catch. Actually, the approach should apply to both stateless and stateful. We did mention the I think PC request in the document, but should be also include those stateful part as the association is a generic and can apply for
Right.
both stateless and stateful.
Okay, but like from the path computation point of view, I guess if you like change one LSP, then you're kind of, yeah, you want to change the other one. Yeah, I guess. Okay, thanks.
Mike, that's kind of applicable to almost all associations in stateful world.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. How many of you have read this document either before in an earlier version or the latest one? Quite a few people have read. So I hope that if we do a second call, we will actually see you guys respond on the list, because if you support on the list, all the consensus will be judged only on the mailing lists. So please, if we do the second call, I have to talk to Julian before we take a decision on this. But everybody who's took the hand, and hurry, maybe note down who all raise their hand, that we need to get more answers on the list. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, I think still no Waymo? No. I missed one in the middle. Sorry about that.
Hello, everyone. My topic today is the PCT constraints for network slicing. The motivation is that according to the 5G context, the network slicing is the collection of a set of topology to support network surface differentiation and meeting the diverse requirements from the vertical industries. So the slices may be seen as virtual networks, and the topologies from PCE will be partitioned to be many sub topologies in transport network. So for now, multiple existing identifiers can be used to identify the virtual network resource, and we must consider this to be viewed as constraints of network slicing when the PC is deployed. So as the figure shows, when we use PC to configure the transport network, when first the application-based service will configured by the users to PC, and the PC will collect topology from BGP LS, and will use the PSAP protocol to configure the networks. So the PC will have the all topologies in the traffic engineering database. So the traffic engineering database will be divided into many sub topologies when the slicing network use the identifiers to partition the resources. So we need to consider the constraints to the path computation. So we propose to define several TE constraints for network slicing. The first one is the network topology information, the source protocol ID, multi-topology ID, and the administrative instance identifier. These are defined in other drafts, and for its proposal for network slicing. Next one is the policy information. It is proposed in IETF Spring Segment Routing Policy. This is the color template to configure the service, so the topology. So we need to consider the color template when we compute the path. Next one is the application attributes defined in IETF is TAP. The application-based service will configure to PC, so PC need to consider the constraints true. First one, the source protocol, for example, the easiest OSPF or configuration, the other type of the protocol, we will collect the PC will collect the topology based on this protocol advertisement. So when we computer the passes using the PC, we will carry the constraints or tell the PC to select the source protocol to constrain the path. Last one is the same, the multi-topology. When we define the multi-topology ID, we will just compute the path in the sub-topology, which defined by the multi-topology ID. The third one is the slicing network administrative instance identifier. This is defined in the draft just for the network slicing. So when we computer the path, we will need to carry the AII object to eliminate the topology. The color object is defined in the SR policy. So when the subtopology identified by the specific color template, then this will carry specific color permulator. So when we computer the path, we will carry the color template, and we will carry the color object to constrain the path. So the next one is application attributes. The application-based service will configure to PC and then configure to the networks. When we computer the paths, we will need to carry the application attributes to eliminate the topology. So these are the several constraints we extend for the PSAP. That's all. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Zan from ZTE. Today, I will talk about PCE extensions for BLTE. What's the latest version? We add the co-authors from Huawei and China Mobiles in this version, and we update. We have received a couple of comments from them, and we update the endpoint object. There are two options in our draft, but we delete the option for the new beer endpoint object to carry the beer ID informations. Reuses the P2MP endpoint object body for IPv4 and endpoint object body for IPv6, which is defined in RFC 8306. Next, introduction. This document specifies extension to the path to PCEP that allows still for PCE to compute and initiate the path for the BLTE. This is the extensions for PCEP. The first is beer capability advertisement, defines a new path segment type for beer for BRTE defines the BRTE PCE capability sub-TLV to exchange beer capability. The second is the SRP object defines a new path setup for BRTE. The third is endpoint object, reuses the P2MP endpoint object body. Yeah. The last is YAO object. We define a beer YAO sub-object to carry the adjacent bit strings, BSL, subdomain, and SI. So this draft is the 6 verses, and we have done presentations many times, both the beer and PCE working group, and we have received a couple of comments from operators like China Mobile and Huawei. So I think this draft is ready to call for adoption. So I ask a working group to call for adoption for our draft. Thank you.
Are there any questions? So thank you for addressing the comment from mailing list and otherwise, and making it clear that this document deals with BRTE only. Do you have any plans for the PCCC for beer?
Yeah, sure. We have a plan, and we also we would like to collaborate with you. Yeah, with Huawei, go on to extend PCCC to beer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I discussed with the beer chairs, I think 2 IETFs ago regarding this work. I will reconfirm with the AD and the beer chairs how to best progress this work. Most likely, since this is a PSAP extension, so the best place is definitely this working group. But how do we coordinate and make sure that the beer requirements are well captured, and whether we are meeting the requirements? That's something via coordination across the beer working group and PC working group we can take care of. How many people have read this document? Thank you. How many of you think that this work is useful? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the input. I'll anyway take this to the list, and we have an adoption queue, so bear with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have last presentation, but our presenter is still not here. I think any information?
Yes, he's involved in another presentation in another working group. So he promised me to come later. So we would like to request for chairs to decide whether to wait for him or we do what else.
Does anybody has anything else to discuss? Any other thing that they are bothered by in life?
Andrew Nokia, Singapore is really warm. So
I think that document was discussed last time in the last meeting as well, though whoever was remote. He had made an update, but I think the key question there is still open. That is the motivation behind that work. That work was discussed in BGP as well. So I think we should, waiting may not be the best idea of everybody's time. So thank you. Thanks for attending the working group and being quite efficient. You have 45 minutes to enjoy. Thank you. Blue sheets. Has everybody signed the blue sheet? If some of you came late, make sure it's updated. Thank you. Don't define the flag field. Keep the empty flag, and then in your document, use the flag.